Big news on Sunday in the world of college football. And we've talked a lot about the college football playoff picture. But one of the big questions we've talked about is, would people lose their jobs in what is an incredibly difficult environment business-wise for many different college athletic departments? And my general consensus was, for the most part, the answer would be no. And it still remains to be seen how many guys are actually going to lose their jobs. But the first really big loss, I would say, in terms of an impact has occurred. South Carolina has fired Will Muschamp. And Muschamp, couple of stats for you here on Will Muschamp. 28-30 at South Carolina in year 5 there, 56-51 as a head coach. He's going to get paid around $15 million to not coach any longer at South Carolina. That is a big buyout that is going to be headed in the direction of Will Muschamp. And look, I don't know if I'll ever be fortunate enough to get fired and get paid a ton of money not to work. But if it happens, I want everybody out there to know you don't need to feel sorry for me. All right? Your life is going pretty well, I think, if you get fired and you get paid $15 million not to work anymore. And I think it's even more noticeably difficult to comprehend that kind of scenario when there are so many people losing their jobs in athletic departments and sports and certainly around the country in a variety of different professions. So I thought that maybe there would be reticence on the side of big athletic departments to fire coaches, even if they were not doing well this season, because it's just a budgetary crisis for many different athletic departments and without the ability to have home attendance and everything else. Now, we don't know exactly how that $15 million is going to be paid. Maybe there's a huge donor who has agreed to stroke that check that is worth $1 billion at South Carolina. Who knows? Maybe they've raised the money behind the scenes. But it's not just that you're going to have to pay $15 million to somebody not to coach. It's that you're going to have to pay millions of dollars more to somebody to become the new head coach. So who are the guys out there that could make sense for South Carolina to be considering? Now, in general, I would say this. A lot of times when you fire a coach, the next coach you hire is the opposite, right? So if you've got a defensive guy and it doesn't work, a lot of times you go get an offensive guy. And if you've got an offensive guy and it doesn't work, a lot of times you go get a defensive guy. That's just kind of the nature in which it works. A lot of times same things happen in relationships. If you're dating one kind of girl or one kind of guy, you break up. A lot of times you don't end up with the exact same person, fair or foul, because the expectation is that's not necessarily the best choice that you could be making. You want something different. So to me, the name that immediately jumps out, and we've had him on this show several times over the years, is Liberty head football coach Hugh Freeze. Guy is sitting at 8-0 at Liberty. He's got him ranked in the top 25. He's already won at a pretty high level at Ole Miss. Yes, he has issues in his background about why he lost the job at Ole Miss. It could be that there is some reticence at South Carolina to bring him in. We talked to several different coaches on this show of late who are having good seasons. And another one that could make sense is Jamey Chadwell, who was the head coach and is the head coach right now of Coastal Carolina, and they are ranked right now. They're there in South Carolina near Myrtle Beach. He's got a lot of connections to the South Carolina area, but we'll see. And then there are other guys out there that I would think might get a call, but in general probably wouldn't really be that interested in leaving. They might reach out to try to hurt Clemson and look at the offensive and defensive coordinators there. Brent Venables, even though he is the defensive guy, and they might try to steal away somebody to try to hurt Clemson. I don't know if somebody wants to take that job, to be honest. So I tend to think that Hugh Freeze is at the top of this list. That would be my guess. Now, a couple of others. Louisiana coach Billy Napier has turned down some other opportunities before. He's had a lot of success. He spent time in South Carolina before. Point is, if you're making the move right now, though, it tends to be a function that you want to go ahead and get somebody locked up before somebody else makes a move. Now, I don't know who that somebody else could be. Maybe you're looking up at Michigan And my goodness, Michigan was just so awful. Congrats to Wisconsin for getting that win. But maybe you're thinking that Jim Harbaugh, based on the scuttlebutt that you are hearing in the coaching ranks, because everybody talks, maybe you're thinking that Jim Harbaugh is going not to get fired, but just to decide not to return to Michigan. And so if Harbaugh sort of rides off into the sunset there, that Michigan job may be very attractive. Maybe you think you're going to be competing for some of the same coaching candidates. And so as you kind of break that down, I think that's a pretty intriguing question to follow and think about why South Carolina has decided to make the move right now, given the fact that there's no real rush, you would think, with Muschamp sitting at 2-5. There's still 3 weeks left in the season. It's going to be hard to recruit because you can't really get normal visits, can't go out and meet with recruits in the same way that you would in a non-COVID era. So this was, I thought, a really intriguing move. And one of the questions that kind of jumps out to me is, are there other schools that are potentially interested in making moves that are now going to feel better about making a move because South Carolina has taken sort of the onus? They'll take all the hits of, oh my God, how do you fire a coach and pay him $15 million in this current COVID era when so many athletic departments are not able to make their budgets? And so as you kind of look forward with it, it may be a function that there are a lot of people out there that see South Carolina take the brunt of this criticism, and then they're willing now to make a move too. And maybe it's after Hugh Freeze. I don't know. What do you think, Dub? Like, there was a lot of talk about Auburn potentially making a move. You are a big Auburn fan. You're an Auburn grad. Right now, Gus Malzahn's team, I believe, is sitting at 4-2. In theory, they're playing against Tennessee this weekend, favored to win that game. It seems like it's relatively hard to make a move at Auburn right now. For some people out there, Tennessee, with Jeremy Pruitt sitting at 2-4, 4 straight losses, there's some discomfort with the direction of that program. There are people out there who would argue that Jeremy Pruitt needs to go, particularly if Hugh Freeze is available. Hugh Freeze has said before publicly that Tennessee is his dream job. Does South Carolina want to try to get ahead of Auburn or Tennessee in the event that something happens there and there's money to be made? I don't necessarily know that it happens, but if Tennessee finished 3-7 or 2-8 and lost 8 straight games, I think some of the reticence to make a move because of the COVID issues would potentially not be as paramount. What do you think about Auburn as an Auburn guy, and what do you think about the idea of South Carolina? Now, one other additional point of discussion is because of NCAA issues, SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey would not allow Hugh Freeze to work in the SEC back when several different programs considered hiring him as their offensive coordinator. Well, now he's been the head coach at Liberty for 2 years. What would the commissioner of the SEC say if someone tried to bring Hugh Freeze back into the conference now? Has he served his penance? Has he been away long enough? To me, this is a storyline that is going to be really intriguing to follow. What do you think about the Auburn perspective? Who would you hire if you were South Carolina?
Well, if I'm South Carolina, I think you're right. I think Hugh Freeze is option number one. What he's done at Liberty the past couple of years is nothing short of incredible. When you really look at it, I mean, this season, they're coming off a win last week against Virginia Tech, a good football team in the ACC. And Hugh Freeze,
they've won 2 road games in the ACC. They beat Syracuse, they beat Virginia Tech, and I believe they still go on the road against NC State, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and when Hugh Freeze was on this program, I mean, he even admitted the talent on his roster is not that of any ACC team, because he's got half of his team are D1 guys and the other half, frankly, aren't, is what he told us on this radio show. So the fact that he's sitting there at Liberty undefeated, I mean, he's got to be the biggest get this offseason for a team looking for a new head coach, in my opinion.
And he's the exact opposite of Muschamp, right? I mean, you agree a lot of times when you go hire somebody who's the exact opposite of the guy that you're firing. So if you had a defensive guy, you get an offensive guy. Oftentimes you have an offensive guy, you go get a defensive guy. That's assuming that the guy is getting fired and not leaving for another job. You're not promoting from within, things like that. So I do think it's intriguing to see what all the behind-the-scenes movement would be on South Carolina. And I also think if I'm Hugh Freeze or I'm advising him, I'm not encouraging him that he needs to make a move right now, right? I don't know that this is a situation where you're looking around and saying, oh my God, we've got to make a move right now if you're Hugh Freeze. I think you want to wait out a few more weeks in the season and see what other jobs might potentially be out there, because you could have more jobs open up than we think, again, because that sort of Band-Aid gets ripped off and somebody's willing to make that decision when it comes to a $15 million buyout. So I just think that is intriguing to follow in general and see how exactly it all shakes out.